Welcome to the Wood Turning Workshop. I got one for you. What has 4 legs, can't run, and sits around in the wood shop all day? 2 wood turners. Or today's project, a beautiful hand-turned stool. Stay tuned.
The Wood Turning Workshop is made possible in part by
Woodcraft since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Tormek, water-cooled sharpeners with innovative jigs and setting devices. Getting your sharpening done quickly gets you back to the job at hand. Tormek, sharpening innovation.
Well, let's take a closer look at today's project. I had a lot of fun doing this and wound up with a beautiful looking stool that'll work great in the shop or look good in the house. Now the first thing is the seat, and I use a nice piece of babinga. It's about 13.5 inches wide for my rear end and about 2 inches thick because I need a lot of support. And then we use Purple Heart for the legs, and it's a really beautiful color, and you can see why they call it Purple Heart. And then down here I use Wenge for the rungs. That way I had a nice black contrast with the rest of the wood. Wenge is a really cool wood. It's dark, but it's also got some light brown streaks in it. Well, the first thing we're going to do is I've already drawn out a circle on my babinga. We're going to take it to the bandsaw here, and we're going to cut it out. Get my eye protection on. And we already have the blade set to the right height. We're going to start this, and we're going to cut out the wood nice and slowly. The tools we're going to be using today are a bowl gouge, a square nose scraper, a curved scraper, a spindle gouge, a detail spindle gouge, a roughing gouge, a parting tool, a set of calipers, and a Jacob's chuck. There! Now that we have that cut out, we have to figure out how we're going to mount this on the lathe. Well, this is going to be the top of our seat, and I can't use a drive spur because that would put a hole in the top of our seat, which wouldn't be good. So we're going to use a face plate with a piece of MDF mounted to it and double face sticky tape. Now this is tape especially made for wood turning, so make sure you get that because it has extra good grip. Now I'm going to draw a circle out on my blank that is just slightly larger than the face plate, so when I drop this on here I'll be centered up perfectly for mounting this on the lathe. It takes a second. Almost there. Ah, that looks good. There, it's good. Oh, that's heavy. Take it over here on the lathe. Now, if you don't have a faceplate as big as this one, I still want you to turn a piece of scrap wood to put on there that is almost the size of the disc because you need all that extra surface area to help hold it. Now, I've got a live center with a small point, cup center in here, and I'm just going to push that against here for pressure. That's going to help hold it in place, and it's also going to help the masking tape bond with both surfaces, so it'll give us a good hold in a minute when we have to move the tailstock to finish the turning. Now I've got this set up, center height. Going to grab my bowl gouge, going to turn my lathe speed way down. We want to start slow, and we'll rotate it once by hand. Nothing is hitting. Hit start. That's about right. Okay, and we're just going to true up this edge with a few push cuts. It's going to be a little bit bumpy on the first couple of passes. And it's very hard wood, so you got to take your time. So we'll come back, take the tool, roll it to close it. start our cut. Now it's cutting better. We're cutting less air and more wood now. And my tool rest is parallel with the lathe bed, so I know I'm making a very straight edge on my blank. Babinga. Now this blank is rotating just like a bowl blank, so I have end grain coming towards me. So no matter how hard you try, you're going to have some torn grain with that cut. So we're going to do a shear scrape and clean up this end grain. Because if you don't do this now, you'll never be able to sand this out. And you can see I've rolled the tool over, I lowered my handle, and I'm cutting with that upper edge of the tool. And you can see the very fine shavings that are coming off when I do this. It's a beautiful cut, and it'll leave an excellent surface. Okay, let's take a look at that. Ooh, smooth as a baby's bottom. Got all that nice end grain really nice and smooth on top up here, so that's good. Now, I need to move my tool rest to this side because we're going to finish up the bottom here and flatten it out. So I want this a little bit below center and about ½ inch or so away from the wood. And I don't want it touching my live center there, that'd be a problem. I'm going to take my bowl gouge now and roll it on its side and just do a pull cut. And you can hear that choppy sound. That's because the wood's a little bit out of round right now. So I'm going to level this out and work my way back. If I started way down here, it's hardly out of round. And if I pulled, here get louder, it's going to chop, chop, chop more. So if I work my way in, it's a much safer cut. So we'll just keep pulling this back, working our way in, and making it smoother. And we'll get the whole bottom leveled out. Okay, now that I have the bottom flat, I just want to do a push cut and round off this edge just a little bit so I won't have a sharp corner on the bottom of the stool here. And I'm using a push cut, and that makes a nice clean cut without tearing out any grain. Okay, now I want to make the bottom perfectly flat. And the easiest way to do that is with a flat-nosed 1-inch scraper. And Babinga is a great wood for taking a scraper. It leaves a beautiful finish. Now some softer woods, they'll tear out a little bit. But Babinga, it won't. Now, I have the tailstock still engaged right now while I'm working the outer edge of the blank because if I get a catch, that tape is strong but not strong enough to keep the wood on there. I'm only going to take it off when I'm doing the very center piece of the wood. Now, I'm working with the leading edge, the right edge, as I'm going in, and I've got the tool angled down a little bit so it scrapes nicely. You don't want that left side to catch or to leave a gouge in your wood. So I'll just keep taking fine little shavings here, and when I'm done, we're off to our next step. Okay, well I went ahead and sanded this to 240 grit. Now we want to mark out where we want to drill the holes for the legs. And so I want the legs to be about 2 inches in from the edge, so I'm going to make a mark about 4½ inches from the center, or in other words, I'm making a 9-inch circle here. Okay, now, that's important because we're going to make cross marks. Now, this is going to be a little bit odd. Here's my grain. I'm going to turn it 1/4 of a turn. I'm going to lock this in. I have a nice way of locking that in on my lathe. I'm going to come here, draw a perfectly level line. I've set my tool rest to be dead center. Now I'm going to take this and rotate it here with my spindle lock, my indexer, and lock it in. Whoop, that's a little bit off, see? That's a little bit off. There we go, nice and straight. There, locked in. Okay, make a mark here and make a mark here. Now we know where we're going to drill all 4 legs. Now I'm going to undo my spindle lock, which is a very important thing, because the next step here is I want to drill a hole, because we're going to have to put a worm screw in this to hold this when we reverse this on the lathe. So, boom, boom, boom. Turn on the lathe here real quick. And I still have this set at my sanding speed, which is kind of nice and slow. And we're going to drill in 1 inch. You can see my little tape mark there. Okay, cool. That's done. So we have a perfect hole right there. It's a lot easier to remove that when the lathe is running. But anyway, okay, now, you want to see how tight this tape hold is. That double stick tape works really well. It's going to take just a little bit more. Almost. It's not that tough to get off. I should have pried it. But anyway, okay, we got it off. We got our hole. We're going to use our spindle lock again. There we go. Okay, now we're taking off our face plate. This is the fun part you don't normally see. Now we're going to put our chuck on. Spin that on. And if you look closely here, this is a worm screw. The worm screw is the right size for that hole I just drilled. We'll tighten the jaws down on this. Okay, now I need one more thing, and that's a little particle board spacer I made. The worm screw is a little bit longer than 1 inch, and that would bottom out in the hole then. So I'm going to take this, carefully thread it on, and that spacer is going to let the screw not bottom out in this. Okay. Now once I get this on here nice and tight, oh, that's going in good. There we go, nice and firm. Okay, unlock my spindle. My next step is really just to work on the top, round it out and flatten it out just like I did the bottom a few minutes ago. So I'm going to start with, there it is, my bowl gouge. I'm about done with the top. Really the only differences is I made this a more generous curve because your legs are going to hang off there. You want it to be kind of comfortable. And especially with my bum, I want to make the seat dish in a bit so it's also a little more comfortable to sit on. So I dished this in about 1/4 inch, and I'm using a round nose scraper now to clean up the surface. While I'm taking care of that, our buddy Bob Fulton, genius of the jig, has a tip for us.
Occasionally I have a piece of wood that I'd like to make a vessel out of, but it's a little raunchy piece of wood with a hole in it. So by putting a balloon inside here and blowing the balloon up and tying it off, then I can take a little bit of wood chips and some epoxy, mix it up real good, slather it on here, and completely cover this hole. Then when it sets up, I deflate the balloon and take it out, and that allows me to use this piece of wood, which could be very pretty, and make a vessel out of it. Then we would have a piece like this, which originally had some bark pocket in it, a bark inclusion, and I filled this with epoxy and wood chips, and then put some turquoise in it. Turned out to be a very nice bowl. That's my tip for the day. Keep turning and have a lot of fun.
Well, everything's sanded, 240 grit. We'll spin this off and go to the drill press. This is a very critical point in the whole process. I want to make sure I drill the leg holes at the right angle. And after a bit of futzing, I found out that 10 degrees was perfect. So I'll lower this bit down here, make sure I'm centered up on my cross mark. There we go. I'm actually going to hold that down and then bring up a clamp. I need extra hands for this. Okay, now I've clamped that on there and I'm going to be in the perfect place I need. Just want to make sure, yep, we're right angles to the whole drill press, so this will not be too compound of an angle. You can also see I put a chamois under here to protect the wood while I do this. And also I have my expensive depth gauge in, and that'll allow me to drill 1 inch deep. That's if my bit will stay engaged. Let me tighten that up a little bit more for you. Okay, I think it's nice and tight. I love television. Okay, back to turning, cutting, drilling, one of those things. And back to my depth gauge. I'm talking about the green tape right there. I just want to go down and make this hole 1 inch deep. And after we get this one done, we'll do the rest of them, and we're on to making the legs. Well, welcome to the madness that is the mind of Yoder. Actually, this Rube Goldberg type contraption makes a lot of sense once you start tearing it apart. This is a leg I've already turned, so I want to use it as a template as I do the turning on this leg, and so I have it clamped in place. Now what you see right here is a really cool device. It's called a spindle steady. Everything's adjustable on this, so this whole thing grips around here, so when it turns, you'll notice the wheels turn. So as I'm cutting and pushing this way, it takes out the vibration, because this is so long and thin, without it, we'd have too much vibration and wouldn't be able to turn it. Now, if you also notice, there are marks on the legs, and I simply created a simple little story stick with lines that show where all the beads and coves are on the whole piece, and I simply put it up here, and while the leg was running, marked off all these places that you can see in here. So now I have reference marks. Well, let's get to turning, and the first thing I want to do is to cut down with a parting tool to these diameters of these first few pieces. And the cool thing is I designed this to where the beads and everything are all the same size, so I can mark these all down at one time. So, we will take my parting tool and my calipers and start here on the first bead and start parting in. Rest the calipers there, you can see. Goes across, we're ready. Go to the center of this bead. Go to the center of this bead. It's a really quick process. Here's my high point on this large bead. There we go. Now I have a 1/2 inch spindle gouge with a standard grind. And I'm just sweeping the tool to make a cove shape. Now this is the bottom of the leg, and we want to make sure that we have enough leg here because we're going to have to trim the end off later to make sure it's level. Now I have diameter marked of this. Oh, I'm very close. Let's see, a little bit further. It's a little bit more than 1 inch. Almost. There we go, that's perfect. Okay, I'm going to sweep this one more time, get a nice clean cut, blend that. Great. Okie doke. Now I want to switch from this tool, which is more like driving a sedan, to a sports car. It's a shallow spindle detail gouge. Now it's got a tight radius to it, so it helps me make these really delicate cuts, but I can also make really nice sharp curves for my beads and coves. The other gouge is just too wide for that. Now I just got rid of the mark where the bead intersection is, but that's okay. I'm going to roll it. Remember, you sneak up on a bead. Roll, lift, and turn. Looks pretty good. Let's get rid of all this excess here. Okay, now we know the height of our big bead. Let's start sneaking up on this one. You can see how this shallow detail gouge allows you to get into the corners really nicely. You don't want to make this intersection too deep though, or the tool will start touching on this side into the wood and scratch it up a bit. So we're almost there. Raise the handle, turn, come back, clean that up a little bit. It's almost like using a skew. There we go. Okay. That diameter's there. Good. We have that shape done. Now we need to switch from a sports car to a bus. Welcome to my bus. It's my 1.5 inch roughing gouge. It is a great tool for making the subtle, long, smooth flowing shape I have to make here for this part of the leg. No other tool will do it better. It's because it has such a wide edge on it that it makes gentle curves very nicely. And just like any long, elongated bead, you sneak up on it also. I'm just going to move my body with it. So I'll go ahead and finish out this part. And now you know the basic shapes for the leg. And once I get this area done, I got to show you one more trick for the end of the leg. Now remember, the holes we drilled in the seat are 1 inch in diameter. So we need to make a 1 inch in diameter tin in here. We'll use this little gauge here. Once this slips over, there we go, we got 1 inch. And we're gonna move this back about 1/2 of an inch. Because remember we went more than about an inch deep. Okay, now the critical thing to make this fit right is to take my roughing gouge and blend this shape into the tenon. Then it'll fit nice and flush into the seat and you won't really see any gaps. That fits pretty good. Now once you have your legs turned and sanded, you're going to have to drill 2 holes in each leg to hold the rungs. And they have to be 90 degrees to each other. And these are going to be 3/4 of an inch wide and a 1/2 inch deep. Now I've set up my drill press over here. I have a V-block which keeps things from rolling on this. I also have a wedge here. The reason I have the wedge is that I want my leg to be at the same angle as the V-block, so by looking all the way down here to the end, I can see that it's lined up perfectly. Now, I've got this set at 10 degrees. There we go, safety glasses. And I'm going to drill a hole, and you can see I have it marked there, that this hole will only go about a 1/2 inch deep into the wood. There we go, one right there. Going to roll it. There's my other mark. Good. Now we're on to making the rungs. Okay, well this is what a finished rung looks like. It's 1 inch here, 3/4 on each end, so it'll fit inside the holes, and just tapered it nicely into it so it makes a nice tight fit. Put it in the holes. You pull this, stretch it apart. Fits really nice and tight. Now one thing to keep in mind, measure from here to here, add a 1/2 inch on each end, so that's an inch. And then after you turn one, put it in, then measure your next leg because these are going to be slightly different each time. Now I'll show you one thing. Unless you're extremely lucky, your stool is going to wobble. Now most methods involve putting your stool on a level surface and doing a bubble level and all this stuff. Well, nothing in my shop is level. So I came up with an idea. There it is. A string level. So we're going to take the string around here, loop it around here, 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 and put this on top. And I want to move the strings right up to the very tip of the leg, because what we're going to have to do is cut off part of the leg so we can get this thing level. I will take a measure here, and my table is flat, it's just not level. I'm going to take this here and go up to the string. Okay, it says 27 inches. I'll come over to this string, 26, 5/8, move that up, 27. I'm going to repeat that for each one of these legs. Then I know I have a perfect level chair. Take my pencil now, I'm going to mark right along this line and follow it around the curve a little bit like that. So now I have my cut mark for the bandsaw and also my 10-degree angle so this thing will sit flat. Okay, well we've leveled out the legs. Look, no wobble. And I'm taking off the last of the pencil marks by hand there. We don't want those because I'm getting ready to put a coat of polyurethane on here. One very important thing to remember, number your rungs, number your legs before you take it apart and take it to the bandsaw, because if you put these together in different order, it's going to fit together differently and you're going to be wobbly again and you won't have made any progress. Well, I want to recap really quickly. Now this is made with a 2-inch thick piece of babinga that's about 13.5 inches across. Fits my rear end perfectly. Then we have 4 purple heart pieces that are 27 inches long. They're also about 2 inches thick. And then we have 4 wenge rungs that were about 1.25 inches thick when we started, about 12 inches wide. So anyway, are you ready for polyurethane? Okay. I just want to take some hand rub polyurethane. I'm probably going to put about 3-4 coats onto here. But all of a sudden you get an idea of the color of the wood that's going to come out when we do this. Now I haven't glued this together yet. I'm going to break it apart and buff it before I do that. But that is just gorgeous. Well, now you can see why I picked babinga for the top of the stool. It is just an incredible wood once you put a finish on it. And I really think the combination of the other 2 woods makes a very striking stool. Matter of fact, this might wind up in the house instead of in the shop. Well, one thing to remember now, we still have one thing to finish. Right down here on the bottom, you see, we still have a hole from the worm screw, and that's how we attached it to the lathe, if you remember. So, since I've laid so many eggs in my career on Woodturning Workshop, I decided to turn myself an egg How appropriate to have my own stool laying its own egg. Anyway, until the next time on the Woodturning Workshop, keep turning. That works pretty well. Eat that scrambled. Nope, ebony.
The Woodturning Workshop is made possible in part by
Woodcraft, since 1928, providing traditional and modern woodworking tools and supplies to generations of craftsmen. Woodcraft, helping you make wood work.
Tormek, water-cooled sharpeners with innovative jigs and setting devices. Getting your sharpening done quickly gets you back to the job at hand. Tormek, sharpening innovation.
next time on the Woodturning Workshop.
It's getting to be that time of year where it's cold and gray outside, so it gets me to thinking about our annual holiday ornament special. We're going to be making a bell. We're going to have to work on that. And watch the contact here. Those are beautiful, beautiful shavings. And I'm just very carefully taking off some of the high spots on the shape. I promised Hagen he got the first ornament this year. I guess the other thing I owe Hagen is a chance to get his dignity back.
For more information about the Woodturning Workshop, visit our website at rsupublictv.org.
Now we're going to take it to the lathe. Whoops, move my tool rest out of the way.
To purchase a copy of this program, please call 1-800-823-7210 or visit our website, rsupublictv.org.
Coming up this week on the Woodturning Workshop, what has 4 legs, can't run, and sits around in the workshop all day? 2 woodturners, or today's project, a beautiful hand-turned stool. And that makes a nice clean cut without tearing out any grain. I'm using a round nose scraper now to clean up the surface. I've laid so many eggs on this show, I made one myself to put underneath my stool. I think that's quite appropriate.